votes beginning at 6:45 p.m. Mr. President, I have 8 requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders.
Duly noted.
Mr. President, yesterday Chicago reported its first case of the new coronavirus variant, Omicron. Our state's health officials predicted this day would come. It did. They are actively preparing for additional cases. The World Health Organization has identified it as a variant of concern. It has the potential for increased transmissibility and could possibly, I underline possibly, evade some protections from existing vaccines. But as we begin to learn about this variant, some hopeful signs have emerged. On Sunday, Dr. Fauci described early data on the severity of Omicron as, quote, encouraging. Additionally, today we received preliminary findings that patients are better protected against Omicron with a third Pfizer dose. And while it's still too soon to draw any definitive conclusions, too soon, what's clear is that the historic investments we made, the Senate, President Biden, these investments in public health are paying off. Thanks to the American Rescue Plan, which we passed earlier this year on, sadly, a partisan roll call without a single Republican vote, America is more prepared. That rescue package not only funded production and distribution of life-saving vaccines, it paved the way for public health officials to detect and track new variants like Omicron. It provided more than $1 billion toward expanding and accelerating genomic sequencing, a process that allows us to analyze how the coronavirus is evolving and spreading in real time so we can respond. Thanks to this investment today, America is sequencing roughly 80,000 virus samples a week. Before President Biden took office, we were sequencing fewer than 3,000, now 80,000 a week. That has made a world of difference when it comes to tracking the spread of a variant. In less than 2 weeks since the variant was discovered in South Africa, it's been identified in at least 19 states in addition to Illinois. As we await more data on the risk Omicron poses to the public, here are 3 things we know. First, and it bears repeating, the best protection is to get vaccinated. 95% of Americans are eligible, and 70% have already gotten at least 1 shot. Within days, we will hit the impressive milestone of 200 million Americans getting fully vaccinated. We need to continue to promote this incredible safety tool, and that means booster shots as well. Second, America must continue to support the global vaccine campaign. As I've said before, COVID doesn't know borders. As long as it's circulating across the globe, the risk of virus mutations growing stronger and roaring back in the United States continues to be real. Fortunately, the Biden administration has already taken important steps to address global vaccine inequality and get more shots to low-income countries. Just this week, USAID announced a $400 million investment in a new global vaccine access program to deliver vaccines to remote parts of the world. I just got off the phone with Dr. Atul Gawande. He's a friend. He's someone I admire very much. He is a surgeon at Brigham and Women's Hospital in the Boston area, a prolific author, and a man who's very insightful. He has agreed to step forward and to work with Samantha Power at USAID. He is the right person for this job at this very moment. So I encourage my colleagues to let him move off the calendar and into the job as quickly as possible. We need his expertise at USAID. The third point I'd like to make is we need to build on the American Rescue Plan's investment in public health. Effective public health systems are like smoke detectors. They can alert us to deadly dangers long before they threaten. At the start of this pandemic, America's public health system had been ignored and underfunded for years. That's the reason why we propose nearly $10 billion in the Buildback Better plan, which we're currently working on, to improve laboratory capacity, disease detection, the workforce, and public health preparedness. This funding will fortify our public health system at a time when it's absolutely necessary. On a related matter, just before Thanksgiving, the House of Representatives passed the Buildback Better Act. It's one of the most pro-family pieces of legislation in modern history. For nearly 50 years, the wealthy in America have gotten richer, while the middle class has been squeezed. Build Back Better is about restoring fairness. 4 years ago, when the Republicans had their chance to use the reconciliation process, they really identified their highest priority: tax breaks for the wealthiest Americans. They continue to hold to the philosophy that if you give tax breaks to wealthy people, eventually people who are in the middle income categories, working families, will start to see some benefits coming their way. I couldn't disagree more. I believe investing in working families in America has always been the best investment. These are families with kids who are destined for college and even better jobs if we invest in those families and give them a fighting chance. The wealthy are going to do just fine by themselves, and they are doing pretty well, I might add. We've got to make sure that this Build Back Better Act, which President Biden supports, really focuses on working families. And that's why the bill that passed the House has the largest tax cut for middle class and working families ever in America's history. That bears repeating. 4 years ago, the Republicans gave a tax break to the wealthiest people in America. The bill that we're considering will give the largest tax cut for middle class and working families in our nation's history. It helps families with big ticket items that keep people up at night: affordable child care, universal pre-kindergarten, expanded affordable health coverage, help with affordable housing. It makes serious investments in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Let's be very clear about it. I can remember a time when the whole issue of climate change and global warming was a truly bipartisan concern. The bills that used to come to the floor were co-sponsored by the likes of John McCain and Joe Lieberman, a Republican and a Democrat, both very seriously concerned about what was happening to the world's environment. That is no longer the case. It is a struggle for us to get Republicans to even acknowledge that there's a challenge, let alone accept the challenge of the solutions that lie ahead. We need to make serious investments in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and the effects of climate change. And critically important to our future economic prosperity, we need Build Back Better to make investments in higher education and affordability, which is the next topic I'd like to address. The Pell Grant program has been the cornerstone of America's investment in college student aid for more than 50 years, but it has failed to keep up with the times. It was created in 1972. Think about that, almost 50 years ago. And at the time, the Pell Grants were worth more than 75% of the average cost of attending a 4-year public college or university. The tuition, fees, and living expenses. The Pell Grant covered 75% of it. Today, the Pell Grant covers less than 30%. Well, what makes up the difference? Student debt makes up the difference. 45 million Americans now own 1.7 trillion, that's with a T, 1.7 trillion in student loan debt. That's more than America's combined debt to credit card companies. And second only to mortgages, is the largest consumer debt in America. Build Back Better will ease the squeeze of college costs by increasing the maximum Pell Grant by $550. It'll also expand Pell Grants and other forms of federal aid to DACA students. These historic investments will help 5 million students from low income earn college degrees and build a better, stronger America. Now, there's one item in here that I'm going to close with that's very important. For years, I brought to the attention of the Senate one industry that purports to be part of education in America: for-profit colleges and universities. With this new Pell Grant, we make it clear that the $550 increase will not go to for-profit colleges. Why, you ask? Take a look at the record. The for-profit college industry is one of the most heavily federally subsidized sectors in America. Some for-profit college companies receive 100% of their revenue from federal taxpayers. That's right, Pell Grants and student loans make up their entire revenue. University of Phoenix is one of the giants of the industry, has been for years. One of the founders once called Pell Grants and student loans, quote, the juice for the for-profit college industry. And with one of the largest ever increases to Pell Grant on the table, the for-profit college industry was looking for more juice. They're not going to get it, and I'm glad they don't. I'd like to leave those who are following my remarks with a quiz. What percentage of high school students in America attend for-profit colleges and universities? The answer, 8%. Next question. What percentage of defaults on student loans are by students from for-profit colleges and universities? The answer, 30%. 8% of the students and 30% of the student loan defaults. Is it just bad luck? No, it's by design. For-profit colleges and universities will literally accept anyone with a pulse. You do not have to show any aptitude or any ambition. If you will sign on the dotted line and they can take over your Pell Grant and hook you up with a student loan, they are perfectly happy. And what happens? Well, the net result of it is often disappointing. The students have to drop out. They can't continue to pay the high tuitions at these places. And when they drop out, they still have a mountain of debt to pay off. Eventually, they're going to default on it. 30% of them are going to default on it. And that is an outrageous number when you think about it. Also, I might add that these colleges and universities, so-called colleges and universities, are notorious for fraudulent conduct, misleading their students about what they're learning and what they can earn from what they learn. It's a terrible record. For-profit colleges just spend 26% of their revenue on instruction. Well, what do they do with 74%? They market and they take it as profit. 26% of their revenue on education. It's a joke. And we're fools to keep perpetuating this terrible drain on the American economy and this terrible hardship on so many students and their families. So over the last 20 years, nearly every major for-profit college has been investigated and sued by state and federal agencies for deception and abusive practices. Many, like the University of Phoenix and DeVry, which sadly was from the city of Chicago, have paid tens of millions of dollars in federal settlements. Since the collapse of the most infamous for-profit colleges, Corinthian and ITT Tech, they received taxpayers holding the bag for the defaulted student loans to the tunes of millions of dollars. So let's be clear, adding new Pell Grant protections in Buildback Better is not about Congress punishing students. The for-profit college industry is doing that quite well by themselves. This is about protecting traditionally underserved, marginalized students and preventing taxpayer dollars from being wasted on these miserable institutions. In closing, I ask unanimous consent to enter into congressional record a letter from a coalition of groups urging Congress to support these new protections for Pell Grants. Among them, the National Urban League, the Education Trust, and Veterans Education Success. I urge my colleagues to resist any attempt to remove this provision during floor consideration. Do not open the spigot of federal dollars to this predatory industry. They have siphoned off enough money and ruined enough lives of students as it is. We shouldn't perpetuate this terrible fraud. I yield the floor.